This is a special meeting of the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. It's basically to meet with Mr. Alan Searle, who has done our compensation plan studies in the past and continues to work for us. And so he's going to give us an update of the results for both Waterworks and the Power Authority. Which one do you want to start with first? Do them both together. Okay. The floor is yours, Alan. You need a microphone.
Microphone's right there.
If you don't mind.
Right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing, Mike. For the record, those present are myself, Commissioner Limchalco, Commissioner Sanchez, Commissioner Santos, and Commissioner Martinez. Thank you. Alan, go ahead.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to make this presentation to you this morning. In preparing this presentation, it dawned on me that we've now been in Guam, operating in Guam some 18 years, and it goes back to I think 2007, 2006 when we first did some work for the utilities. So certainly I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for that working relationship over the last 18 years. In between times, some of the recent work that we're doing, University of Guam, Guam Visitors Bureau. So the model that we use continues to be extended around the island. I'd like to start off with what are the critical components of a compensation model. In short, there are two. There's internal equity and external equity. If I'm often asked what constitutes a model, it's about being both internally equitable and externally competitive. If we look at Gov Guam, the basic percentage, they have a heavy emphasis on internal equity using their job evaluation tool under the Hay methodology, and probably less on the external data. With regards to their own methodology, it's the other way around. I've always believed that you need to keep your finger firmly on the pulse when it comes to market data. In this case, the market data for every position within GPA and GWA. With our particular methodology, the two results there, we can bring them together by way of a regression analysis. It's probably the most visual result that we can give. What it does at the end of the day, it shows clearly where both utilities are relative to the external marketplace. That one-page document in itself is worth $1 million. It's the most valuable thing that we can put on the table. The basic premise at the end of the day, coming up, my apologies. Let's go back to that slide. With the regression analysis, we can pull that data together, obviously to generate a new pay schedule and implementation ranges for every option, cost option. One of the benefits of the model at the end of the day is that it's both structured and transparent. Let's look at internal equity. What we're talking about here is a job evaluation tool. Gov Guam uses its own. It's called the Hay methodology. We use one as well. It was originally developed by Price Waterhouse. I myself used to work with Price Waterhouse many years ago. But in essence, what it does, job evaluation is a tool whereby it endeavours to assess each individual position, not the employee holding those positions, but to assess the position using a variety of factors and to derive an overall figure at the end of the day. Case of our tool, we use 12 factors, as you can see on the screen there. Each one of those derives a numeric value which we can add up to give a total result for the position. In the case of GPA and GWA, and there are the ranges there. Essentially very similar, average 758 for GPA, average of 768 for GWA. What these results do is that we can start bringing together and do the first component of that regression analysis that I spoke about. And here we have here, this is the result for GPA. So along the x-axis, we've got job valuation points, and on the y-axis, US dollars. I'll just quickly flick over to the result for GWA. You can see they're very similar. I'll just toggle back. They're very similar, but what's not on that graph is market data. So this is step one to generating that full regression analysis. In terms of market data, external equity, we spend a long time gathering data. When I say a long time, it's probably 3 to 4 months in gathering data for both GPA and GWA. I mean, there's a lot of positions involved, and we gather data on every position. In your handout I've given you there, Appendix A on both sheets, I think it's pages 1 through to 10. That is the results of the market data. It's very extensive. Covers 5th mark percentile right through to the 95th. In terms of where we gather it from, 1 and 2, Power Association, Waterworks Association, fairly standard, Bureau of Labour Stats, Department of Labour, federal government, etc., etc., etc. We also have third-party data providers that we gather data from. We have a variety of sources in which we gather data from. So it's a sort of a reciprocal exchange of data in some cases. That's just the way the market is. Right, the results that you see, I said pages 1 through to 10, it presents the market percentiles, the 5th through to the 95th for every position within the utilities. I also point out to the CCU that it also includes unclassified positions. So in terms of looking what the market is paying for those unclassified positions, please refer to that document. It'll give you a guide. The 50th mark percentile is the market average. Let's come back to our regression analysis now. As I said before, the following printout excludes the GMs, but includes data from the 5th right through to the 95th. 2022 market data. They're an exponential regression line. Let's have a look for GPA for a start. So what you've got here, this red line represents GPA. It's considered an average line through the data plots. The red spots are a point for every employee. The dashed lines is what the market is paying. So you've got the 5th mark percentile, 25th, and the 50th. So the 50th mark percentile, once again, is the market average within the United States utilities. So what's that graph tell us? Essentially, the graph showing that GPA right now approximates the 5th mark percentile against utilities in the United States. What does that mean? 95% of the market in the United States are paying more than you. A little bit of a hard hit, that one. But that's what it's showing. If we look at the waterworks, essentially the similar result. I mean, basically I'd equate both utilities at being at the 5th market percentile. I'll just toggle between them again. There's GPA again, and the waterworks.
So Alan, that's sort of where we were 17 years ago.
Good.
The 5th, right? And then we thought we were moving up the ladder to the 25th the last time I saw your presentation. But now, as the rest of the market has adjusted what they're paying people, we've fallen back to the 5th.
It's a good point, Simon. In fact, in the very next slide, what I want to do is explain 7 reasons as to why you are where you are at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll discuss these 7 factors, and then I'll present the results of the costing to you. Let's look at number 1. I cannot overemphasize the importance of conducting regular market reviews. It's the backbone of the work we do. I used to say conduct one every 3 years. I'd bring that down to certainly conduct it every 2 years. Whether we do it or HR and the respective utilities do it, it doesn't really matter, but at the end of the day, that needs to be done. The results, when I talk about a market review, are in those pages 1 to 10. That's what I'm talking about, so that data needs to be updated. I mean, the basic premise is you cannot make strategic decisions on pay unless you know the true market position. I'll put a little note there on the bottom, GPWA's 22% increase. I suspect they would have struggled to do that. Why? First step 1 is that our models are different in terms of the methodology. GPWA is not monitoring every position within GPWA in terms of what the market is paying. We are for GPA and GWA. First area. So in terms of calculating that 22%, I did do a little bit of research in terms of how it was calculated. Essentially, they divided up all of those positions under the general pay plan into 12 categories. They assessed the average salary of those positions within each category. They were then compared to GPA, GWA, the airport and the port in terms of comparable positions and the variance identified. They then went about using those same 12 categories and looking what the Bureau of Labour Stats in the States says about in terms of the average market position. So you've got two averages. They looked at the variance with that, applied a weighting, and came up with 22%. A little bit difficult. I think they would have found it very difficult. You have to monitor the market in terms of being able to give net results. For those that are interested, we did an analysis of, going to the regression line. The two black lines here is the 50th and 25th of what the utilities, the market is at the moment. The blue lines at the bottom here are the 25th and 50th from the new adjusted pay schedule from GPWA. What it shows that there's a little bit of a gap there. I think in DOA's submission to GPWA, to the government, they do also make an ad there that even the 22% is probably going to fall short. I think that is clearly the case. I mean, I support them so far as the fact that I think that what they're doing is in trying to become more competitive is very good, and that's obviously where you need to start that road. But unless you can clearly say where DOE is, for example, in the market or any other entity within GovGuam, unless you can clearly say where you are in the marketplace, it becomes a very difficult exercise. And just a last comment on that 22%, it was across the board. Bit of a danger in doing that. Obviously, for various reasons, I'm sure you can all work out. I mean, people that are on very high wages who may be already outside the market get 22% as opposed to someone down the bottom still getting 22%. So it's not the best way in terms of handling it, but nonetheless it's perhaps a step, I would say, in the right direction in terms of being externally competitive. Inflation. Bit of an unusual event has happened here. The current rate of inflation in the US is the highest in 40 years, 2022. We look at the graph supporting that. 2022, it got up to 8%. It's incredible, the highest in 40 years. If we looked at the last review we did in 2017, obviously a lot more stable. 22, it jumped to 8%. As of September this year, it's come down to 3.7, so at least it's transitioning down. Why is it high? I'm not really entirely sure. I mean, you could maybe relate it to some of the COVID events in terms of industry response, but nonetheless very high, and that has had an impact in terms of salaries, in terms of starting to creep up. People are getting a bit cautious, obviously trying to attract and retain their employees. Industry salary trends. Typically within the US, growth is at 3%. Over the last few years for the utilities industry, this has exceeded 3%. Once again, if we look at the graph here, our last market review, 2017, fairly stable, 2.6%. Obviously a bit of a blip there, but once again it started to increase. Once again, Simon, and helped to direct in terms of the comment you just asked before, these particular reasons will have an effect that's pushing up salaries at the moment. People's response, I mean, you read about it every day. I know people having difficulty getting their employees to come back into the office. I think even yesterday I read about Amazon giving their managers the authority to fire people if they don't come into the office if at least 3 days a week. This can cause problems. I see from already, we'll see what's in the papers, but it is a problem. Generally, salaries do sort of go to the same sort of track as inflation, but we're not expecting an 8% increase. Like I say, it has peaked and come back to 3.7, but nonetheless, there is a trend for utility salaries over the last few years to increase. The next one here, methodology. Not a slight error on our own part, but it's been just in how we've handled it, this particular part of our methodology. Essentially, what happens is that for each cost option, we're looking at costing moving to the 15th percentile or the 20th, etc. For each option, we identify an implementation range. Here's just an example. Line electrician 2, this was based on the 15th mark percentile. We have an implementation range. Very simply, a range minimum value and a range maximum value. The difference between these is 5 sub-steps or 5%. Historically, as a comparator, we have used the range minimum value. What I mean by as a comparator, once we calculate, we've identified this value, the case of then comparing that value to, for all line electrician 2s, is their base salary above or below that figure? That's how we do the costing. One problem in part of this is that the maximum value, the maximum range, is actually where the true 15th market percentile is. So we're costing at the 15th. That is the actual true comparator, but we'll come back 5 sub-steps. This we have done historically. Several times over the years since 2008, we have used this little buffer in between to allow for the inclusion of employee performance data, whereby we've collected the last 3 performance reviews on file. We've calculated those, and those that have been performing extremely well, we're able to slot further up the chart. It's been a valuable tool, but we've moved away from that now to go back. I'm getting ahead of myself a moment. As a result of that, because we've been using this figure here, which is 5% lower than the true value, we look at the 2 reviews that were conducted in 17 and 20. It's probably GPWA Waterworks migrated to the 10th in 2017 and to the 15th in 2020. So once again, Simon, that helps explain why it is in terms of, you might be thinking that you're going higher. Has it been a little bit less than that? Moving forward, I won't go into too much detail, but essentially that range maximum value is going to come down here. So we'll still identify our implementation ranges. Just for those that are in HR, the range of minimum value will be the true percentile which the model is based on. Competitive recruitment, another one, just 2 more to go before we get into the results. Recruitment on island, particularly for specific positions, is becoming very, very competitive, particularly engineers at the moment, but we'll extend it out to IT, SCADA, technical positions. This is just some details from Naval Facilities Guam. Catchy note here, show me the money, trying to hit you. These percentages here are a percentage of base salary. So you get your base salary for hires from the US, an extra 12.6% for COLA, 15% a locality fee, 12.38 non-foreign post differential. Either way, they're padding it up, and it does look quite good if you're, I guess, an engineer in the States and possibly looking to come here. It doesn't seem to be consistent in terms of, if you look at the results from naval facilities, it does vary between positions that they're endeavouring to recruit for, but particularly with engineers, it's becoming very competitive. I am aware that I think both GPA and GWA have lost engineers recently. Once again, in part, that's a reflective of where you are in the market, but we obviously need to be competitive in that area. I'll just make a point on COLA here. COLA sort of raises its head a little bit when inflation's high. Obviously, it's a response that employers can give a COLA allowance when times are tough. Invariably, COLA is given as a percentage of base salary. I've always wrestled with it a little bit myself in terms of the percentage. Obviously, someone earning a lot of money gets a very good percentage. Someone on low wages gets a small amount of COLA. At the end of the day, a loaf of bread is a loaf of bread. I mean, in terms of what you're paying for those goods and services. I think the way we do it in terms of our model, we have our regression line, and whether you're above or below, the focus is on those that are below. So those that are in need, that are vulnerable in the marketplace, do get the benefit of going to a higher market percentile. So how do we counter this problematic recruitment? Obviously, as I said, migrating to higher market percentile is one option, and that's what this review is about. But you also have a couple of other options at your fingertips, and those for both John and Miguel: above-step recruitment and migrating to selected positional groups. Above-step recruitment, I admit we may need to review the terminology or the wording on this, but nonetheless the tool does exist for you to do that. I can remember years ago, John, you were having trouble with a generation manager years ago. It's just those type of things. I mean, Miguel, you're looking for a chief engineer. Certainly refer to the market data that you got, all the positions in there, and how much you need to go further up the line in terms of making it attractive. Once again, I think you may just need to review the verbiage on that. But again, that's a tool that I think you should certainly perhaps use more than you perhaps have done in the past. The other option is what we just called migrating selected positional groups. It's here where you have a group that is exposed to attraction and retention. You've got heavy recruitment, and we can move that group above the rest. And just to take, for example, we look at, this is just actually a plot of engineering as it is in GPA. So this is just engineering as a group. Probably similar, 5% down the bottom, starts to increase a little bit down here. I would still say at the end of the day, you're not very competitive as a group when it comes to engineering. If you look at the waterworks line, a bit different here. Miguel, I think it clearly shows in the absence of your chief engineer, is not there, but I think what it shows is that your next senior band, your senior supervisor, engineer PEs, you're paying well, you're trying to look after them, which is obviously where you want to be. You want to keep them. But I think it does show, once again, in the absence of the chief engineer. But what both of you have got in terms of a tool that you can move engineering as a group, or it could be IT, data, to a higher mark percentile than the rest. We'll talk later on about moving utilities to a certain mark percentile. But even with that, you could elect to go to a higher mark percentile for a particular group. We could take this particular example, the utilities are at 20th, we could have engineering at the 30th. So the option is there to do this, and I would certainly suggest you seriously look at doing that. From my looking at the situation with regarding engineers, it's getting extremely competitive. Just a couple more before we look at the results. I think rewarding qualifications is a very important one. I think both utilities have got you're getting exposed to quite a changing, you're vulnerable to the dynamics of a changing workforce at the moment. You've got a lot of, I think, older employees that are retiring. I'll put perhaps unwilling to learn, acquire new skills, but that probably is the case in a lot of situations. You've got that older population, but we also want to look to retain those that are moving up through the ranks, obviously for them to obtain new skills as moving forward. How could we do that? Obviously, I think one of the challenges is to identify the specific qualifications of those CTP positions. A lot of it gets lost in translation. I think people can get employment in a role here on Guam by not necessarily having the formal qualifications, but you can take that position through your experience and skills, etc., etc. That's okay. I can relate to that. But you, as an employer, what you want to do is that you want that employee to gain and achieve those particular qualifications that are relevant to the position. How can we do that? This is just one option that I just put on the table with you. To have a differential, if we just take your engineer supervisor, yes, we can still have our implementation range. So if this was at, say, for example, at the 15th mark percentile, the range minimum would be the 15th mark percentile, but have a differential. In this particular example, the differential is actually 10 sub-steps up to here. So if someone does have a PE qualification, professional engineer qualification, you can put them on there. I'll mention this as a differential because I think what's important, without getting into the details of it all, when we migrate to a higher mark percentile, it's important to actually retain that differential. And this, by having it here like this, we can still retain it. So you can go from the 15th to the 20th, there's still be that 10 sub-step differential. But there's lots of different ways you can do it. I mean, you could have for smaller, less critical qualifications, but still important, you could maybe have it go up 8 steps. There's different models to do it, but the beauty of the pay schedule and having sub-steps allows for that sort of tool to be introduced. Lastly, the target mark percentile. We've been talking about moving to the 10, 20, 30th and 40th, but what is the target at the end of the day? It makes sense that it should be the 50th market percentile. That's the market average within the United States. As a target, I think you want to be there. Once you go more than the 50th, you start to become a market leader in your own right. Not necessarily do you want to be in that position. You want to be competitive, but you don't want to necessarily be a leader in that particular field. One strategy is for employees less than the 50th market percentile, increments to be continued to added to base salary as they are now. For someone who's over, the increment is paid out as a lump sum versus it being added to base salary. It's a good move. I consider it a win-win strategy. I mean, it's both the employees still getting their increment, the win-win for the employer insofar as that little base salary amount's not being added, so it's still being held back. So it is a win-win. If you want to look at for both utilities in terms of how many are over, might be a little bit hard to see back there. This is GPA. There's the 50th mark percentile. Looks like you've got one employee. For the waterworks, again, a bit hard to see back there, but probably 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe the fifth one possibly. It comes back to what I said before about being able to implement that, and DCC are doing it right now, by the way. They've moved to paying out people above the 50th market percentile by way of a lump sum. But what it does come back to what I was saying before about monitoring the market. In order to do this, you obviously need to know what the 50th market percentile is every year. So there's a challenge there to do it. I mean, you can do the full market reviews every 2 years, but obviously look at maybe what extent the market has moved in the intervening year, apply that percentage, calculate it, and look at who's above or below it. So they're just 7 factors. Simon, I hope it's touched on a little bit some of the reasons as to why you are where you are. Obviously, we're here at the moment to look at the cost results. What we're talking about here, when I talk about migrating to a higher mark percentile, obviously, we have our red line here at the moment, talking about moving that red line to a more competitive market position. Just a couple of points here. We've examined 5 cost options, moving to the 10th, 15th, 20th, 25th, and 30th. The results are 2022 market data. Slight error on the bottom here. I think GPA works on a 2-year cycle for their budget, but I understand GWA is on a 1-year cycle. Some apologies there for a little bit of an error. I know certainly for GPA, there's a $2 million amount set aside per annum to allow for structural adjustment pay. We've taken the assumption that the same exists for GWA. The cost results that you got in the handout are based on migrating the utility from the current staffing pattern. So from now to the 10th, from now to the 15th, etc., etc. If you want to look at the variance between them, you obviously got to look at between the 15th and 20th to look how much in between times. We've also gone ahead and done some additional calculations here, which I think you'll be interested in. They include helping to offset that transition, obviously by taking into consideration the pay for performance being paid annually. Let's get into it. So GPA, we've got 2 options. Option 1. Option 1 is talking about FY24 going from the 20th to the 30th. Option 2 going from the 25th mark percentile to the 30th. Similar amounts in terms of the 2 options. In terms of your $2 million budget per annum, certainly option A fits within that. Option 2, a little bit over in the first year, but the second year you can see on both cases considerably less. Why these are high initially is because you have your current situation at the moment you have, and by moving them to the first transition, we actually pull that together to be a lot tighter. So once it's tighter, going from the 20th to the 30th is less, 25th to 30th is less. So both options you're looking around for GPA at about $2.7 million. In terms of what is the preference, if possible, I would go with 2. Why? Obviously, you're going to a higher mark percentile. You want to make yourself start to get more competitive. I mean, I realise we're at the 5th at the moment, but come January, for example, GPA, you could be at the 25th and 30th the following year. Just look at the GPA results. Keep in mind that both these results are contingent upon the pay for performance being paid out on an annual basis. In case of GPA FY24, the first payment will be done in January. It'll be paid out. Then you can migrate to the 20th for $1.7 million. John, 80% of your employees at the moment are below the 20th market percentile. It hurts a little bit. I mean, that's quite significant. 88 below the 30th. We look at option 2. So once again, you're going from the 25th mark percentile to the 30th. There are the results there. You might see why it's not applicable here. Obviously, this first part is the first step in the process. That gets everyone onto the new pay schedule. Once we do the second component over here, all these people are already on the new pay schedule. We're just moving those that are below. So even though you have 81 employees that are still below the 30th, they're already on the pay schedule. We don't have to actually adjust them. So once again, just for GPA, those are the cost results, roughly $2.7 million. For GWA, 3.1. So here, the same options going from the 20th to the 30th, 25th to the 30th. Once again, and it's entirely up to, I guess, in terms of whether the funds are available. Here, obviously, you are a little bit over your if it is your $2 million budget on an annual basis. But once again, if you can go to that, the second year is actually a lot more less demanding. Option 2, again, this would be the same ideal. If GPA can do it, it would be excellent if the waterworks could follow suit. I know it's a little bit more of a stretch, Miguel, in terms of doing that. Again, take comfort in the fact that the second year is only $180,000. I know it's easy for me to say that, but the initial hit is obviously in here at the moment as well. Once again, contingent upon those pay for performance being paid out. There's just the waterworks. Once again, Miguel, right now you've got 88% of your employees below the 20th market percentile. Again, obviously a little bit higher to GPA's 80%. And the second option, option 2, once again going from the 25th to the 30th. And once again, the summary. So 2.7 for GPA, 3.1 will be at roughly $400,000 difference between the utilities. Thank you. Are there any questions? Simon. Base salary? Correct. Like, I can help. I can help with that. I think the model they both use at the moment is one that the actually the military follow, whereby managers of a particular department can award a certain percentage of the range on offer to the employees. So, for example, if I was manager in charge of T&D, for example, I could give, I think it's 3% to a 3% increase to a percentage of my employees. I personally think it's a good model. I've looked at performance options over the years, and I think some may say that's very structured, and what about, I mean, you know, everyone could be doing well, but as a manager, I think it forces you to identify those that are performing well. If you don't have that control in place, you run the risk of everyone getting a 3, everyone getting a 4. One of the difficulties on, and again I reflect back to GovGuam, is that there's no distinction to be able to identify a top performer from a mediocre performer. Everyone gets the same increment, and that's a problem. And what happens is it starts to fall into disarray, and people don't like filling out the forms. There's also the risk here within the utilities of that happening as well. So we've got to be on tight. You really need a simplistic but an effective tool to be able to do it. But managers themselves, as part of my role to actually assess the performance of my employees, I should be actually remunerated for me actually doing that work. To come back, it's based on a percentage basis, Simon. So I think at the moment the range is from 1, 2, or 3%. In terms of.
So if I, okay. So if I make my base salary $25,000 and I get a 3% performance, like dollar.
Correct.
And my base stays the same. But I get, no. Oh, it is added to the base. Okay. Okay. So okay. So it's not one time. So you actually add it. You actually bump my base pay. My base. But then that's all captured in all that data.
It is.
The average pay that you.
It's,
because they keep.
I think it can be very valuable for the CCU at the start of the financial year to look at that, what range is on offer. I mean, I say that to actually all the boards that I talk to, and what I mean by that is if you've had a good year, yes, the range could be 2, 3, 4%, or 3, 4, 5% for an exceptional year. But if it's been tough, maybe you're saying it's going to be 1, 2, 3 this year. I think that's being very prudent in terms of how you manage it. But again, it's something I think the board could look at the start of each financial year in terms of what performance range is on offer. I think right now at the moment it's 2, 3, 4%.
It now is if it hasn't been a good year, we defer.
Which is 0%.
Right.
Well, at least you're exercising discretion, which is sort of the idea.
With the other point is the pay schedule that we use here, there's lots of sub-steps. They're all in a 1% increment between the sub-steps, so it makes it very easy to go up 2 sub-steps, 2%, up 3 sub-steps, 3%, etc.
Okay, Commissioner Santos has a question.
How do we differ in respect to GovLaw on increments?
The pay schedule under GovGuam is doesn't have sub-steps. They just go on steps. And the steps do vary between each step. But there's no facility to have that broken down. Because it's not broken down, a mediocre performer and a top performer will still get the same increment, if you know what I mean. Here, because of the sub-steps, we can split it down and give someone 1%. We can give someone 0 if need be. But that is the main difference, is actually in the format of the pay schedule itself.
Now, with respect to only talking about salaries, you take into account benefits?
No.
If we came and we said, this is one thing I've always said, if we go to the employee and said, okay, this year we hope to convince our legislature to carve out health benefits, and we can come to the employee and says, we're going to pay for all your medical insurance.
Yeah. Historically, we've left benefits out of
As part of
the
the
model. I think in the costing that you've got there in the handout there, I think there's a 40%, we're calculating benefits as being 40% of total compensation, just to give you a figure in there as well. But it's showing in those last pages of your handout.
That's retirement, health,
Yeah,
that's the whole
yeah.
package.
It's roughly 40% of total compensation is benefits, roughly.
What's our
29. Is it 29 or 26? What is it? Chris, anybody know? I thought it's...
what's our employer contribution to
Employer
retirement?
contribution about 26% on payroll, right? Come on, guys. I know that and you don't.
That's because,
It's the largest single
no,
government cost.
payroll is one of our lowest expenditures.
Here, I know, but I'm talking
LEAC's more
about-
expensive
yeah.
and debt service is more expensive.
No, I'm just, well, maybe I'm equating it to Gulf Guam,
Very different.
but it's all,
Alan?
Yes, Joey.
that's what I mean. That's us. I'm sorry,
Okay.
that's the taxpayers thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Alan, first off, the presentation that you made on the screen, you're going to give that to us also, right?
Yes, I have. I've got it on flash drive here.
It's
I'll
in
be
board
giving it
books?
to Lou.
Oh,
Is
okay,
it in board books already?
It's board
Okay.
books under CCU.
okay.
Correct?
Thank you. Okay,
Yes, it's on
good,
there.
thank you.
My apologies.
second
My apologies.
question
I could not
this-
get it to you earlier.
Yeah.
The second question that I have is, so if I heard you correctly, then we should be updating our market survey every year. Is that correct?
Certainly every 2 years.
Or
And,
every 2 years.
And that result is what you've got on pages 1 to 10. That's what I'm saying, is that you need to keep on top of. Do that certainly every 2 years. Whether we do it or HR does it within the respective utilities, it has to be done. The basic premise said before, you have to be able to know where you are in the market to make informed strategic decisions on pay.
That's an important one. Okay, would you be able to, or should we be looking at, we have employees from top to bottom. Now, our general managers, for example, we may be paying them at a higher percentile than the rest of the company. Is that a good thing, bad thing?
You can have a differential. I mean, the beauty of that document you've got there, page 1 to 10, includes all unclassified positions.
Yeah,
So it includes all unclassified positions.
yeah.
So if at the end of the day you decide to go to the 30th mark percentile for all employees, yes, you could have a small differential in terms of your top management that could be paid at the 40th mark percentile. But the beauty is you've got the market data in front of you in terms of what the market is paying. The 50th mark percentile is the market average.
Okay.
We do some work for fuel companies, petrol companies. They have a policy that top management get paid at the 75th mark percentile. The rest are paid at the 50th. It's always been the case. It's probably why petrol is so high, but I mean, again, that's just their strategy of how you do it.
You know,
Typically,
Leverage managers have.
No, I have to tell you, because the difference is you have engineers and they're engineers and they grow up. But when you get to the level of being the general manager or the CEO of the company, you have to be more of a business person in addition to the engineer. So, you know, I mean, that has to be recognized somehow. It's like, you know, when you look at the president of a bank, he stops being a credit officer and becomes more of a marketing person. That's why my favorite bank, Bank Pacific, their president is very good at marketing. He's a marketing guy.
I think he scooped the pay too.
Yeah, yeah.
He's off island, I can say.
But you know, really, that's what I'm trying to say, that there's specific talents that go there.
I think it's up to all of you to decide on what that differential should be. I mean, if you know that the rest of people, we're all, the model's being implemented at the 30th market percentile, yes, there can be a differential,
Okay.
but higher that for the senior management. But I would strongly advise that you certainly make reference to or use that data that's in Appendix A there.
Okay.
And that's what I'm saying should be reviewed at least every couple of years.
2 years, okay. And in terms of the pay for performance, the 5 steps in between?
Oh, that's the implementation range is what we
The
call it. Yeah.
implementation range?
Yep.
Okay, the implementation range. That's the call of management.
Yeah, we just use it for slotting purposes, just for costing purposes.
Yeah.
Obviously for recruitment, when HR put out an ad, you'll see it. There's a range. That's the implementation range. So they're identified for each cost option for every position.
So with this, with the current schedules that you've given us in the current implementation ranges based on the current market percentile, this is the first year where the minimum of the range is actually at.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So if we're talking the 30th market percentile, the range minimum value will be the 30th market percentile. So hopefully we'll see a little bit better improvement on it.
Yeah, talk to the mic, Josh.
It's something you certainly want to look at for engineers, John. I mean, I know it's been a rough road recently.
Right, because everyone's pulling our IT right now.
But general managers, we can bring down the percentile, right, the office?
No.
He's being funny.
Not 40-year experience general managers, because that's not in the market survey. You don't find 40-year experience engineers in the markets.
No, but there's a 95th percentile.
There's some at Our Lady of Peace.
Not yet.
They're seriously though,
Sorry.
I think it is very important because we are very competitive. I like the way you described the military or the Department of Defense or the federal government's pay and how they're very aggressive in recruiting and retaining their people.
Yeah.
And I tell you that to me is a great concern for engineers, for IT people, for top management people, because we do have senior management folks also, besides the general managers. So
It's particularly volatile for engineers at the moment, and I think, Chris, you brought it up. I know GPWA as well. John McGill, I would certainly look at that option in terms of we've got to decide whether is it just my chief engineer or a particular position, or we want to migrate that as a group to a higher market percentile. I'm more than happy to help you with that if you want to do that. And we can just keep improving it until we are competitive.
Commissioner Sanchez.
And the wage data you're providing now, is this the latest survey?
It's based on 2022 data, yes it is.
So we would do another one next year?
In 24.
Next year?
Conceivably, yeah. But like I say, it's whether we do it or yourselves do it.
And we're asking our engineer GMs to evaluate what we pay engineers? Conspiracy theory. But not ours.
Never happened.
They've graduated to GM.
So as we go forward, and I bring this up because in hindsight, we passed a resolution adopting the CTP wage scale and this market percentile concept back in 2006 or 7, I think, when you first came here.
Right.
And that, if I remember correctly, I read that resolution, and one thing that stuck in my mind, it says we were going to get to the 50th percentile within 10 years.
Correct.
That was the resolution. And so as the two general managers decide to put their resolution together, be very careful on what we do, because I really believe that if you're going to represent something to your labor, that you should stick to it. If you're gonna do it in 10 years, you do it in 10 years. If you're not gonna do it in 10 years, then don't say it.
But if you don't have the money, you
Uh,
can't
it-
predict the money in 10 years.
But
What if
you
your
have,
predictions
but
are
you
wrong?
have, so therefore you word the resolution different, okay?
I mean, it's a goal, because
It's-
my memory says it was, we were trying to get to the 25th percentile, because we were at the 5th. But whatever it was, the idea that I liked was, we, as a board, said, we want to migrate our people up, right, whatever the number was, do it over time to minimize ratepayer impact. And I think collectively, we've done a good job, but we've also seen the world has taken on a different face than 20 years ago, where you got inflation, you got all the issues that Alan described, and then a particular sector of labor, like engineers in our cases, they're even beyond some of the world events that have raised what salaries in general, right? The engineering department has been raised even more on a competitive basis because of the nature of the world, apparently, right?
So my point being that I would encourage the two general managers to really work on the resolution, that they should be in the driver's seat on that, okay? And then we will, of course, discuss it at the CCU.
Because it actually
But-
becomes our
but
policy.
I understand,
Their
I understand.
recommendation.
I'm trying to encourage them that they need to really focus in their recommendations to us, okay? To put in where they believe things should be, so that we can consider it, okay? We make the decision, I get that, but I want them to put their recommendations in place, okay?
I think as a last comment, I've just got the two costings coming up again here. I think, if possible, option 2 for both utilities is where the target you want to go. I think it's a little bit tough in that first year, but if somehow you can not necessarily split it, but accommodate it over the 2 years, that'll get you to the 25th mark percentile in case of GPA in January, and the following year to the 30th.
So- Yeah, I like
For GWA, again, it's 25th to the 30th, a little bit tougher to get to the 25th, but again, in the following year, you could be at the 30th mark percentile. I think option 2 for both is the ideal, and if it can be done, that's, I think, where you want to go. It'll certainly be a boost in terms of making you more competitive in the marketplace.
General managers, you have any extra questions? No?
No?
Okay. This issue will be taken up at a later time. We're not making any decisions today. I just wanted the commission to be briefed, and this can come up when you two are both ready. Because it's going to be a joint resolution. We're both going to go at the same time, okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
And I mean, you're going to have your different views of your company, but we're going to move together.
One
Would
resolution.
we do this for like effective January 1? So we thinking of the next 60 days we do this?
No, ours is, our sequence is January 4th or something, that is all.
January.
January 6th.
What about GWA?
Yours, I think, is the, like, fiscal year, right? So,
Yours has a lag.
yeah, you might,
think the timing was January for GPA, and I think September
Yeah, so there's a differential. Okay.
GWA.
Okay?
Now, is there anything, well, think about it, is there anything preventing GWA from migrating? Either you migrate to January or he delays till September. Maybe you
No.
two talk about it.
you can come to join us.
Well, think about the ratepayers, think about the ratepayers.
Before we disintegrate, any other questions?
This
for
January.
Alan, thank you very much. Very informative.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chair.
Second?
Thank
Meeting's
you.
adjourned.
Very good, very good.
I missed you before, sorry about that, I was going